A very warm welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, watch a story chosen by a friend of mine and I commentate and drop in observations, all the while trying to guess what my special guest's favourite thing about the episode might be.
Hi Toby and everyone, my name's Joel Ahrens and here's what I'm not. I'm not a comedian or an artist or a musician. I've never worked on Doctor Who, written a book, or been on a podcast. I am an ordinary schmo. I am a STEM primary school teacher over here in Melbourne, Australia. I've been a Doctor Who fan for almost all of my 48 years. I was born and raised in the classic era, but I love the modern era just as much. And for this episode, I've chosen to talk about The Girl Who Died.
Okay, folks, I'm going in. This is interesting because, well, it has the potential not to be very interesting at all. I like to think I can pluck facts or at least nostalgic recollections about my first time of watching, or the rediscovery as an adult, or the comparisons between my expectations from Target books to when I finally saw the classic series. You know, we have certain various different pathways that are unique to us all, but also bond us because of various shared experiences, no matter what our backgrounds, in terms of how we encountered classic Doctor Who, and of course an accumulation of knowledge based on watching, rewatching, discovering things, interviewing people, going to conventions. I have no such resources at my disposal for more recent episodes of Doctor Who. And I know to younger listeners, there aren't younger listeners, younger people aren't, they're too busy doing Doctor Who fandom their own way, which I'm intrigued to discover is not to do with sort of behind the scenes and things like that. Young Doctor Who fans sort of express their fandom in a different way, and perhaps there's a podcast to do about that one day. And in fact, I've spoken to some younger fans recently. I'm aware I'm sounding like an ancient sort of chatting cadaver. But anyway, let's not get waylaid by a piece of phraseology that threatens to take me down an alleyway I don't need to go down. What I'm trying to say with brevity and failing, I always fail on the brevity, is that these more recent Doctor Who episodes, even though this isn't that recent because it was broadcast as I record this 9 years ago. Good Lord. I mean, 9 years ago, I'm recording this in October 2024, and it was broadcast in October 2015. How on earth has so much time flown? I consider this a new episode of Doctor Who, and yet there are people who are now old enough to vote to children, proper children who were infants when this was on. Good Lord, that is terrifying. Apologies, there was a bit of background noise there, and there's been a hiatus since last I spoke, even though not for you, because the girl who went out so that I could, the girl who went out giving me a chance to record a podcast, unfortunately became the woman who came back earlier than she'd said, which was the noise and the interruption. But fortunately, she's now become the pensioner who's gone to bed early in order that I can finish what I started. So yes, apologies for that. At least you can tell it's live. It's not. But because I want to do this. I have been putting this off for about almost 2 months, I think. I need to do some more new series. I need to, not fall back on what I know, because I've done far more classic Who than I have done new Who. But it's harder. I haven't seen these episodes as much. I don't have as much trivia. I don't know as much probably about some of the actors. So I'm just going to have to dive in. Joel, the guest of this podcast, sort of apologised for not being an actor or a comedian or a podcaster or a writer. I think one of the beauties of this format is that everybody brings something to the table, and everybody brings different things in their own bespoke way of doing the show. And I'm delighted that this is an equal opportunities podcast. I don't just select people because of their CV. There are various different reasons, but with Joel, I think it's nice to have somebody from the other side of the world who has, come to Doctor Who in a completely different environment from mine. I mean, a warmer one for starters. But I always think it behooves us to use the modern methods of communication and the fact that Doctor Who stretches across the world as well to see what somebody from a different background, a different country from me, enjoys about the show. And I think one of the lovely things about my sort of forays into Doctor Who, the world of Doctor Who fandom and conventions and meeting people, is that I've got to know people from America and from Canada and Australia that New Zealand, that there's no way that I would have met were it not for Doctor Who. And I think it behoves us to reach across the pond and reach around the world and consort with people not in our immediate area, because it's how we learn. Sometimes in profound ways, sometimes in very subtle, small ways. But I'm interested. But I'm particularly interested because I don't know what I'm going to do with this story. It is not one I'm wild about. I wasn't wild about it when I watched it. I've got an interesting angle, I think, on next week's episode. We're doing this as a two-parter. But I have watched this again. I don't always do that, but I watched this again in order to get an angle on it, or to at least do some homework on it before recording the commentary. With the classic series, I tend not to. I tend to just dive straight in unless I fancy watching it for pleasure. But I watched this just because, well, I've only seen it probably 2 or 3 times in total now, and that includes my last homework watch. So what the hell I'm going to do with this, I don't know. I'm also interested in whether I will succumb. A few people have sent in comments saying, look, if you don't enjoy an episode, say so. That does, to me, go against the spirit of what this is about, because I don't like, as a listener, listening to somebody talking about my favourite episode and giving it a kicking. I want to hear them appreciate its finer qualities, and I think it would be churlish of me to celebrate what I love and then go for the easy option with the ones I like less. But other people have said, yeah, but if you don't like something, be a grown up and discuss why not. And it would be interesting, rather than I guess what people don't want me to do is to get it involved in some sort of mental gymnastics to go, well, yes, I think that's good, and it just sound false, and it just be an exercise in spin, really, going, well, I'm doing a sort of essay where I'm pointing out the positives, but my heart's not really in it, and it's not true. So anyway, I've got a whirligig of emotions spinning around as I go in to discuss this episode. But I think it's important for me to be honest as we go into it, that this might be a terrible podcast. I'm so very sorry. Let's see what I can come up with The Girl Who Died. It's a spoiler alert if ever there was one, but obviously the title is deliberate. And let's see what happens. God, 9 years ago today. I cannot believe that. Not 9 years ago today, actually. 9 years ago this week. 9 years ago this week, as I record this. And I'm going to press play in 3, 2, 1. Nice close-up of an eye to begin with. Oh God, yes, I've forgotten about this. I only watched this. I only watched this very, very recently. I've totally forgotten about this beginning. That it starts in space. For some reason, I thought it started with them landing with the Vikings, but it doesn't. There's this funny beginning. Well, it does give us a chance to see the spacesuits, which I like. I like the continuity that we have. I like a bit of lens flare as well. I'm sure lens flare will be something that we will point out as being very dated in 20 years' time. But the lens flare of the space shots, that's actually lovely space shots here. And but this is quite a Moffat-y kind of beginning, isn't it? Where you've got a bit of sort of deadly hijinks with an idea that's just been created for a scene of jeopardy. I was, I was good. Yeah, and yeah. So then we have So it's a funny sort of quick scene, which I was going to say it's a memorable way to start because it hits the ground running. But actually, it's not that memorable because I watched this not long ago and don't actually remember this beginning, which is curious. And I have to say, I've started by saying, "Oh, I'm not, I'm not." I'm not a massive fan of this too, but it's not the first episode that I have particular issues with, as far as I can recall. It's more the second, but let's see what happens, because it is, it's the character, the Maisie Williams character, does, the story is told over the two episodes, so it's all there seeded for a reason, like this night shooting. Capaldi's costume is interesting, isn't it? Because he's got a modern T-shirt and a sort of hoodie, but he still has the sort of shadow of that elegant look that he had in his first season. I mean, I'm never a fan of a buttoned up top button without a tie or a cravat or something, which is very much the look of you get a lot of people who work in television these days who will wear like a polo shirt with a top button done up, and I just think that feels like they're keeping some sort of, I don't know, they're trapping themselves in. Anyway, let's not get it. It's not a look I go for, and it's a very popular modern look. The done up top button without the tie. And I'm not wild about it, but that's not what we have here. And Capaldi doesn't look like he's dressed casually, but he kind of is. A hoodie and a T-shirt is a very casual look, but he's such an elegant man. Are we going with the Vikings? I mean, Vikings are a great thing to have in Doctor Who. Vikings are instantly recognisable, beards and horns. And I'm sure I read on Twitter recently, the Vikings in this are wrong. I don't care. If they, Doctor Who, I think can deal with sort of types. I think sometimes when Doctor Who travels into the past, we get a version of the past from literature rather than from history. I'm kind of okay with this. Doctor Who exists in a storytelling world. So would the Vikings not have horns? Would they not have beards? Would they be somewhere else? I don't really care. It's not a history lesson. And if Doctor Who makes us look at the real history and learn that Doctor Who is wrong, I am fine with that, unless it's committing some cardinal sin, and I'm sure people will write in to tell me. Lovely aerial shot, establishing shot here. Ed Bazalgette. Now, the Bazalgettes are television legends, aren't they? Peter Bazalgette is a huge figure in television, who I think is a relative of Ed Bazalgette. There's a lot of them about. Peter Bazalgette was behind Big Brother, amongst other things. And yes, Daniel Hill's wife is, yes, because there's Olivia Bazalgette, isn't there? Bazalgette, who was a PA or an AFM on Sharda, where she met Daniel Hill, who played Chris in Sharda, and married him. So Sharda may have not been completed, but a family was, and some other people were created as a result of that. Now, but is Ed Bazalgette? So he is the director, and what I can tell you about him is that he is bald, and I know that, well, for maybe reasons we can talk about next week. So yes, stay tuned for next week, because he directs this week and next week and the return of Dr. Mysterio. But yes, you can find out why I will talk about him next week and how I know he's bald. He is related to Peter Bazalgette. He was also the lead singer of a band when I was young and on Top of the Pops, where they called the Vapors, and they had a song called "Turning Japanese." So he's had quite an eclectic. He's got quite an eclectic CV, and has made a couple of different sorts of impacts on popular culture. And I think Peter and Ed are also related to Olivia Bazalgette, who worked on Shada. I think they're a big sprawling family. So yes, Vikings are fun in Doctor Who. I always think this one, is it Mary MacArthur, the ginger-haired one, looks very like the actor Sidney Bromley, who played lots of sort of scraggly bearded ginger sort of men. He's in Dragon Slayer. He's also in Quatermass, Sidney Bromley. But he was a mate of William Hartnell's. So Murray MacArthur, I think, looks very like him. Here's David Schofield as Odin, a part originally to be played by Brian Blessed. Now, it's rather sad that we missed out on Brian Blessed appearing in Doctor Who for a second time. However, it does mean that David Schofield, a mighty actor, becomes a notch on Doctor Who's bedpost, and he's so good, Peter Capaldi. Oh, look, there's a bit of a rainbow. But David Schofield is one of those actors who should have appeared in Doctor Who and hadn't until this point. And I remember he either wasn't announced or I remember his appearing. Either I read about it in the Radio Times quite late in the day. I was quite surprised by it. But I certainly hadn't expected it to be Brian Blessed either, so I think I'd missed that in the advance, even if we got it in the advance. I found out about Blessed's non-appearance later, but I also found out about David Schofield's appearance relatively late in the day. I think Schofield is a marvellous actor, first known to our family because we were watchers of the film, and in the early days of VHS, one of the VHSs we had access to was American Werewolf in London, where he plays a darts player in the pub with Brian Blessed and Rick Mayall and all of those guys, and he has the immortal line, "You made me miss, I never miss," He was in the first production I saw. No, not the first production, but an early production I saw here in Manchester. In my early days, we studied James Baldwin's play Blues for Mr. Charlie, and he was the sort of racist killer. But he played with something. It's quite a rounded piece. It examines prejudice and justice and all sorts of things. And he gave a very good performance in Blues for Mr. Charlie at the Royal Exchange. So I've seen him on stage, and subsequently I have got to work with him because I worked with him on a film called 6 Minutes to Midnight, where it had a marvellous cast, including Judi Dench and James Darcy and Jim Broadbent. I didn't work with any of them, but I did share screen time with Eddie Izzard and David Schofield, and I was particularly pleased to meet Schofield because of his illustrious history. So yeah, Murray MacArthur's gone there, having been the Viking that they met first. He's also the first one to go, which is a shame because I think he looks very Viking-like. But they all get. Yes, because this guy as well, whose name I can't remember, they're the first ones that we meet, and they're the sort of first two to go, which means that we then meet this other lot. I mean, we've seen them already, who become the sort of Dad's Army, which I think might be one of my favourite aspects of the episode. But yeah, David Schofield was very nice. I've probably got other things I could say about David Schofield when we see him, but I should probably talk about. Can you see I'm sort of throwing in here are connections that I might have, because I'm not sure how much I'll have to say about this episode. But actually, this is good stuff. I think Vikings on a spaceship is sort of good Doctor Who-y stuff for me, that you've got the past clashing with the future, that sort of juxtaposition. It's the sort of thing that only Doctor Who can kind of do, is to get. And I remember films like The Vikings, which was a Kirk Douglas film when I was younger, and I think there's a Vikings TV series. I think there was. I know there was. I auditioned for it and didn't get a. I had an audition for this thing called Vikings. literally, I got a self-tape the day after I'd shaved my head and trimmed my beard right off because I was getting annoyed with how long they were. So I think I was already doomed to not get the part because I wasn't hairy. Although Ian Cunningham here, who's an excellent actor, often plays coppers, has no hair on the top of his head, but he still has a beard. But and he's also a really good actor that's done loads of TV. So but anyway, I didn't get Vikings. I'll blame it on the fact I shaved my head the day before, because it's those things that you cling on to rather than embrace the possibility that you might just be a failure. So I was very excited to see. That's a lovely set, isn't it? It's I think I mean, I'm guessing that must be somewhere, because it's very robust, very industrial. If it is a set, well, my God, well done. But I suspect it's a works somewhere. This is my problem. I don't have the facts at my fingertips. Why are you listening to me? I'm hopeless. But I remember being very excited that Maisie Williams was going to be in Doctor Who, because Game of Thrones had a bit, was riding high at this point. I'd come late to the party of Game of Thrones, so I'd sort of binged a couple of seasons in fairly short order, having avoided it but read about it and seeing that every actor under the sun was in it. So, and of course, one of the actors I didn't know from it was Maisie Williams, because she was a newcomer, whereas the Donald Sumpters and and of course the the Sean Beans and the Mark Addis, but I'm talking about further down the credits, the Donald Sumpters and Julian Glovers, the the people that are in my shows of yore. Being in Game of Thrones was the great appeal to me, but obviously there's this younger cast who play very important parts in it, and Maisie Williams was having a fine old time of it. As one of the most important characters, who is in the whole show. So here's David Schofield. There's a lovely. I remember watching a film called Valkyrie that David Schofield is in, directed by, is it Bryan Singer? And he's one of the sort of supporting characters, and in the commentary, I think it was Bryan Singer reveals that he'd been impressed with the work that David Schofield had done, and I think he'd perhaps done some of the reverses. Sometimes actors don't commit fully to when the camera's not on them, and what David had done had showed commitment and skill. So he ended up being in the film slightly more. There's a couple of sequences where he's sort of quite prominent, where he might not otherwise have been in the film, and he's given a bit extra, because he's not just a good actor. He's a he's a proper pro and a committed thesp. And we knew him in our family from American Werewolf in London, but then I'd been pleased at university to see him turn up as an important role as a corrupt copper in Our Friends in the North. If any listeners have not watched Our Friends in the North, I would urge you to do so. That also has Donald Sumpter in, and is just a parade of glorious actors. I mean, not just the main stars, the Ecclestons and Daniel Craigs and Gina McKees and Mark Strongs of this world, Malcolm McDowell's, but Peter Jeffrey and Danny Webb and David Schofield, and everybody. It's glorious. And David Schofield was very nice to me and very lovely, and I got to say hello to him on the film that I was on with him, and I was playing a stand-up comedian, and I was having to do a sort of set to a load of extras who of course I was worried about making them laugh, and sometimes used to people not cooperating with you, but of course they laughed every time, because they had to. That's what they were there for. But it's only halfway through the day that I realized, they're laughing every time because they've got to. That's what the scene is. It's not me. I'm not making them laugh. They're acting. But David at one point went and now do your Shakespeare, as though I was doing an audition. I mention that's simply because that's my anecdote involving David Schofield. The other one was that I've got loads of photos of me and Eddie Izzard, but and my friend who was on set doing the makeup did take a photo of me and David, but she's never given me the picture, and I don't know why. So I don't have proof, but I did definitely hang around with him, and he was very, very nice. So This has a sort of plot that I enjoy, which is, if not base under siege, village under siege. With he's got such presence, Peter Capaldi, and that his physiognomy is brilliant. His physicality is brilliant. As I say, he can wear that outfit, which I've got t-shirts and hoodies, and I do not look that. He's got because we know that when he's got the smart jacket and the smart shirt, he looks sort of elegant and Victorian or whatever. But he looks kind of casually elegant in this, and it's a really nice mix-up, because it shows that the Doctor doesn't have to be sort of dandified in order to have the sort of eccentric sort of sense of style that he has, although he is helped by those trousers. I love those trousers. I would adore to fit into trousers like that, because I much prefer sort of trousers that are sort of boot cut like that than the baggy ones, which is what I'm always given, and it's because I don't have the figure for them. Oh, it's my tragedy. I like this, that the Vikings who are left are the sort of, oh yes, and he's sort of showing that he's a fighter, and he's not and he's got a bit of the Tom Baker about him there, hasn't he? The kind of, I am a bit dotty, but also I'm a seasoned fighter. He's not wild about it. He doesn't embrace it, but he's not gonna pretend that he's green about the violence thing. He knows he has to do it, and he's done it. But that's really an effective moment, actually, with all this, and he does this very well, and it could be awful. And is it punctured now because he speaks baby, which I love. I love the fact that Doctor Who speaks baby, and I'm not sure all Doctors could get away with this, and I think it sort of walks the line, because also babies are just going food or frightened, but it's I applaud the attempt. And especially in the face of that traditional sort of rallying cry, let's fight sort of talk, the fact that there's time to sort of earth it a little bit and go, and to bring babies into stories of grown-ups murdering. It's I think it's sort of quite profound and moving. Yeah. It's a tricky one, but I think it, and I can see why people might find it mawkish or striking a slightly false note, but I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it. And Doctor Who as a show is a little bit hypocritical sometimes, and it interests me to. It doesn't bother me. I think. I think it's the paradox that we live with, that it's a show about somebody who we consider to be this great, I consider to be this great character of peace, who nonetheless, when the chips are down, fights and uses violence and even takes lives, or quite often does things that result in lives being taken but doesn't directly do it. And that itself is a contradiction and a paradox. You're sort of saying, well, and I can understand the sort of more gung-ho approach that says, no, if you're gonna take life, you should actually do it. And so I understand those who are less lily-livered than me, who say, well, no, Doctor Who is somebody who sees what is wrong and doesn't characterise the Doctor as a peacenik at all. It says Doctor Who sees what is wrong, stands up for it, and fights. And if the bad guys die, that's tough on the bad guys. And yes, we'll occasionally do a bit of navel gazing about it, but actually, when the chips are down, knows to stand up and fight, and gives a much more sort of gung ho reading. And I Yeah, and I do vacillate between the two, and I think that makes the show interesting and makes our responses to it interesting, because I think they're both equally valid readings, and we basically just impose ourselves. This is the beauty of the character, really, is that, and I like that moment where the baby stops crying, the doctor's decided to stay, and Clara's great. They've got a great rapport. The beauty of the character of the Doctor is, and this is why I don't think that, I think the Doctor should always be a bit enigmatic and unreachable, and we should never try to bring the Doctor down to our level, because if the Doctor is slightly aloof and unreachable, any of us can use the Doctor as a blueprint for ourselves, or what we feel, or what is missing in our lives. This is all quite funny. It's very silly, but it's rather delightful. Heidi, yes, and I don't think anybody talks about the fact that Heidi is Barnaby Kay, who is an excellent actor, who was the villain in one of the Crackers, and has been around for years. But he's the husband of Nicola Walker, Liv Chenka, and I think has now done various bits and bobs for Big Finish. But he's got more of a connection to Doctor Who than his role in this might otherwise show, and it's nice casting for him, actually, this, because it's not the sort of part I've usually seen him play. He's an excellent actor, and I've quite often seen him play sort of awful toffs. And he's in an episode of Spooks with Nicola Walker as well, actually. But I like this. I mean, it is a morally tricky thing, isn't it? The Doctor turning a sort of motley crew of farmers and thatchers and weavers into a fighting force. But I what happened, Big? That's a lovely line. That is a lovely line. The Big Bang, up to the mounting sense of futility. That is very, very nice. And the other actor here lying on the floor with Barnaby Kay is Tom Stourton, who is the son of Edward Stourton, who is rather a well-known BBC newsreader. And you can see it when you look at him. They've both got a similar sort of physiognomy about them. So everyone's got... I actually know more about some of the actors in this that I might have given myself credit for. I think Ian Cunningham's done some Big Finishes too, but I'm more used to seeing him on telly playing coppers, as I say. Very good actor. That's a beautiful shot of nearly silhouetted Doctor against the night sky. I do think these two work very well together. But yes, I like the funny names the Doctor gives them all. It adds to the Dad's Army feel about the sort of slightly hopeless. I like that in a story, a sort of motley crew fighting against the odds. But as I say, and it addresses this, you're turning them into fighters, she's just said, and that's very true. And what have I made of you? And I think this does speak to the paradox inherent within certainly how people like me see the show. And I'd be interested in what my I have a couple of I know a couple of listeners to this show are more conservatively minded generally, but also I know a couple of more conservatively minded Americans who like the show for its Britishness, but I know probably have a slightly more pragmatic approach to some of the things I'm talking about, and yet still love the show, but perhaps would digest this in a different way. And I like that, and I like the fact that we can. It saddens me that often now, if somebody has a different view of the show and its central character, or if the central character does something we don't like, I see people on Twitter doing it, sort of objecting and saying this is, this is problematic. Well, no. What it is it's interesting because it's drama, because it's not real. It's highlighting this stuff in order to give us, to exercise us mentally within the story, because that makes the story interesting to watch. You're not being invited to judge the writer for what he's saying, or to judge that. It's more to go, this. Both of the things that I've enunciated about the character of the Doctor could be true, and it's interesting how we might fall on one side or of the other. And I think that's interesting. There's a judgmentalism to discourse that has popped up more recently that I am actually less comfortable with than with somebody giving a completely different reading to the character of the Doctor from because this is, anyway, let's not get bogged down in that. I haven't talked much about Maisie Williams in this. My main memories of her performances are from the next episode, so I need to save some of that discussion for then. I like the fact that he has this. He doesn't. I was talking recently, and people quite enjoyed my observation about the Third Doctor and the way that he speaks to aliens in a way that is deferent, respectful. I like the way that the Doctor talks to this young person, because he is curt and pragmatic. And he's saying I think these people are idiots, but actually he's going against that in the fact that he doesn't talk to Ashildea as though she's just a speck of dust in an infinite universe. He gives her the time and he gives her the respect, and the Doctor can be both of those things. He is somebody, as I think Colin Baker said, who could cry at the death of a butterfly and yet be, sort of unmoved by, universal disaster. And that's the terrible thing about being the Doctor, is that that everybody you meet in the great scheme of things is terribly unimportant. And you also know at the same time that every single person you meet, and this is what Doctor Who has, I think, always made me feel, because I get attached to the guest characters that we meet, and because there is so much death in Doctor Who and so much bravery and so much fun to be had with somebody in one scene or whatever, that also every single individual life is one of so much potential and is so important. And both of those things can be true, and I enjoy the fact that this story ponders on those things, even though it and perhaps I find it perhaps more interesting to talk about than I do to watch, because we've had a lot of sort of sitting around and chatting, but actually I then appreciate that, and I like this piece of music as well, and it's written by Jamie Matheson, with whom I have a history, because Jamie used to be a stand-up comic, and Jamie has played my comedy club, Excess Monarchy. Jamie has slept on my sofa. He's watched my VHS of Genesis of the Daleks when he stayed over at my gig. Oh, God, if this was 10 years ago, then that was probably more likely 20-odd. And he actually got in touch with me when he was pitching to Doctor Who, in order, because he knew his Doctor Who, but not like the back of his hand. So I feel like I've played a little part. I'm always in the background, never canon. But I did meet up with Jamie, and we had a coffee and a bun, and he pitched some of his ideas to me, just to see if they could be rejected for having already been done. And then he sort of got in touch and said, actually, the meeting didn't go anywhere. I was quite confident, and it didn't go anywhere. I think I've missed the boat. And then a year later, he was suddenly on, and he'd done two episodes in a row. So and we did go a bit back and forth then as well, and I've seen him since. So he's a good lad, Jamie. He's not had an awful lot on telly in recent years. He was writing poetry last I emailed him. But he's one of those people that I knew from outside of the world of Doctor Who, who's entered the world of Doctor Who and had the name on the credits of Doctor Who. And it makes me feel nice that it's more special to me that I know somebody from Doctor Who who I don't know from Doctor Who through Doctor Who. Do you know what I mean? I love my friendship with Rob Shearman, but I'm only friends with Rob Shearman because I met him at a Doctor Who thing and he'd already written for Doctor Who at that point. So it's an entirely Doctor Who bred thing. I like it that my life can sort of touch Doctor Who without a direct contact with Doctor Who, because it makes me feel like a real person and not what I am really, which is just a glorified Doctor Who fan. Which would make, if that's what I am, that would make me sad. I like to think of myself as somebody that has a life in the world of entertainment and doing and doing things that are more than just Doctor Who. And yet, I wanted to also somehow go back to Doctor Who. That's a nice image. What do we think of the Maya? I remember pictures of the Maya were released. I quite like their texture. The fact that they look, that they look slightly blistered and coppery. More than the sort of rather, clunky mobile design that they have. And I like again. I think I've been told that the science in this is nonsense, but I like the way that the Doctor reached the conclusion of how how they can be defeated. I think that's been artfully worked into the plot, and this is doing a very, very Doctor Who thing, where the baddies are being distracted by a show, and the Doctor has also got everybody. And it's not. Yes, I know they defeat them by fighting them, but he's got them to use their intelligence. He's got them to be braver than they thought they were. Got them to be more capable than he thought they were. And I like that. That to me is what Doctor Who stands for. Now, yes, the inconvenient truth is that what that means is they will become killers or warriors or whatever. But what it stands for in terms of what these characters are, which is slightly shambolic and lovable and hopeless, and they become brave, and they defend their village and reverse the polarity of the neutron flow. Lovely. I'm scared. Oh, he's got such a brilliant face, but yes, he basically weaponizes this young woman and causes her death, and that's at the heart of the sort of guilty pleasure that this show is. Because if you think about it, a lot of our most exciting scenes that we watch in Doctor Who are the ones of violence and death and destruction and monsters. And what does that say about us? But also, it's contained and it's fictional and it's weaved into a story, which is why the Vikings being types, which is why the depiction of history being sometimes artful or literary kind of helps with that, because you can be large and overblown and still be truthful when it comes to emotion. So this is all quite cleverly done. I like the fact that it's all sort of spoken mirrors. And yes, and I like what this is a sort of metaphor for as well, as about I've already alluded to the fact that this is wrapped in the way that things are literary. This is all about the power of storytelling, and we as Doctor Who fans, storytelling is what has got us through the day, has got us through difficult times. But storytelling, I mean, if you want to be fancy about it, in the current political climate, storytelling is what can change the world. And I think we have bad faith operators using storytelling now, and often through means that pretend or purport themselves to be purveyors of fact, news, reality. Well, that's what this is kind of doing. It's weaponizing storytelling in order to distract or undermine or whatever. The you know the appearance of the Viking. Yeah, this is basically a sort of he's threatening him with a viral video that's gonna undermine his reputation for being a killer. And so I think that's all rather smart. I think that's all rather clever. You can relate it to today as well, and the way that yes, reputation and dishonesty and storytelling and all that sort of thing are used to influence people, which is actually quite a troubling thing. But then there's the stinging the tail, and it's I mean, we know it's coming because of the title of the show, which I think does hang over the episode. And Peter Capaldi, there's nobody better than Peter Capaldi at sort of doing that, and it's partially because he's not a soppy doctor. That when he knows the terrible consequences of something, he really knows them, and he's not he's not one to get sad, but just because he's not sad doesn't mean he doesn't feel the impact of it on a level. And actually, that's very powerful, because he's struggling with that. This doctor that we know have seen dismiss death quite casually, and I totally buy that the doctor can do that one minute and be different the next, because you must when you're in it. And actually, I find as I get older, I'm always, my Facebook is full of saying, "Oh, I'm sad to see so and so has died." In fact, I've done that less recently, because I feel like I was just becoming an anorak-clad Grim Reaper, a harbinger of doom. But also, as you get older, you almost lose people every week. I mean, now, because we know people, we know more people, we're in touch with people, even if it's only at the other end of an email or whatever. But there's, and I have far more colleagues because of the nature of my job, which might be people I've worked with a couple of times or something, but you still know them, and and because of the networks that we have through the worlds of fandom and all the other things I do, comedy, entertainment. There's you're losing people on an almost weekly basis, and if you broke down and cried at every single one of those, you'd be subsumed in lachrymicity. Doesn't mean I don't feel them and I'm not sad about them, but you kind of get on with life as well. You acknowledge it and you move on. Whereas I'm sad that the passing of that time where every single death you heard about was an absolute tragedy. I mean, when I was younger, I cried when people died I'd never met. I wept at the death of Patrick Troughton. I wept at the death of my guinea pig. That wasn't even a person. But yes, the shadow. But now, I don't know how I feel about this. The fact that he's who frowned me this face. That he remembers the fires of Pompeii. He remembers the fact that the actor who plays him has been in Doctor Who before. I mean, it's thematically apposite to this story to use that in order to encourage him to save the single life. I love this theme. I really like this piece of music. But I'm not sure how I feel about acknowledging the fact that so why did the Sixth Doctor regenerate into Commander Maxwell? Was that to remind him to beware of Time Lords who played with a pencil. But anyway, I had a running joke with some friends of mine about when the Doctor recognizes Eve Miles from Torchwood and goes, "Oh, are you from an old Welsh family? Because you're played by the same actor who played Gwyneth in The Unquiet Dead." And part of me sort of goes, "No, you should just ignore that, because otherwise it's every time an actor appears in the show, has appeared in it before, you have to go, 'Hello, General Carrington, have you got a Dutch relative who works in the gas industry?' or whatever." But anyway, that's I'm joshing, because it doesn't really matter. You use that if it helps the story, and you don't if it doesn't. And I think it gives this story a very powerful moment. It gives the Doctor the impetus to do something interesting he immediately regrets. Which does answer the question, because I sometimes get a bit cross, especially in the Moffat era, when time travel is used to save companions or to big events. And you go, well, why don't you do it every time somebody dies? It's just if somebody's played by a lower tier actor, it's like, yeah, well, you can just stay dead, screw you. But this actually addresses that, because he does it. And immediately regrets it, because it comes with a price. And I like that as well. I like the fact that it's not, unlike Ace, Grace, and in the TV movie, when the TARDIS just travels back in time and saves the nice people from that story who died, but again, screw everybody else. And it's just, that's a terrible, awful get out. Whereas this is the whole reason behind the story, really, which does make the Viking element of the story, because this is quite a long coda, seem like it's just sort of building up to this to facilitate what this two-parter is really about, which is about this gift of immortality, which leads us to the problem of the next episode. So I wonder if that's one of my issues with the story, is that it never, this episode is really about setting up the next episode, which means that the Viking stuff, even though it has some lovely sort of scenes where mortality is talked about, and it does have that very interesting stuff about reputation and storytelling, but it seems slightly perfunctory, I suppose, because as the title tells us, we're actually setting up the story of this girl who dies at the end, who's going to become the woman of next week. And I wonder if retrospect means that you go into this story sort of slightly underestimating or undervaluing the Viking strand, which is maybe why I worry structurally about what this two-parter does. And I think it's fascinating that they don't even give him time to sort of work out that he's done the bad thing. He's immediately regretful. I'm quite grateful for that, in a way that we kind of know that that's probably where the story's going, and it doesn't take him 10, 15 minutes to cotton on. But it does mean that, he does that thing, he saves her life, and then he's immediately, oh God, what have I done? And we've all done that. I mean, I do that all the time, because I don't plan anything. I will do a thing to solve a problem short term, and then immediately go, oh, if I hadn't done that, and this problem perhaps wouldn't be a long-term problem. So I totally identify with his action, and I like the fact that Doctor Who has captured that feeling of doing something in the moment to do a quick fix that actually has long-term consequences, and to go, well, it's a Doctor Who is a story about time travel, so we can examine those long-term consequences. But again, I feel that more sort of intellectually, this is a brave attempt to do a shot that is suggesting that passage of time as well. But it's it's obviously a bit of green screen, and I think will probably date as a shot. Although you can see her individual hairs there, which often in bad green screen you can't. So that was a brave stab on a shot that I think will date in the future. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's I enjoyed talking about that story more than I thought I would, and that's maybe because maybe I think it's a story that has ambition, therefore, beyond what maybe I consider it having as a sort of as a viewer. And here is the next time on, which comes post credits, because it's got, you know, it's kind of got slight spoilers that impact on what we just seen. The watching this next time on, because of what it contains, might well have been a very different experience for me. But we will talk about my failings and disappointments some other time. Let us talk about the successes contained within The Girl Who Died. What are my three? It's 3 things, isn't it, per episode? 3 things about The Girl Who Died that I particularly like. So I think the main thing I like is the Dad's Army nature of the Vikings, the Doctor with this, because the Vikings also could have been quite. I mean, I would have been. I mean, it would have been quite fun to have slightly more over the top Vikings, I have to say, and I think. Much as I love David Schofield as an actor, I think a more scenery-chewing, just larger-framed actor like Brian Blessed might have given the story an extra slightly over-the-top dimension that might have made it slightly more memorable. I think Brian Blessed can't help but to make things memorable. But maybe that's only me knowing that Blessed isn't in it, holding David Schofield up in comparison to that, and if one doesn't know that, one doesn't feel lifted up. But I know I think sometimes Doctor Who has fun with things like Vikings, and I don't think the story has as much fun with Vikings. And I know the Vikings were terrible, and they've raped and murdered and pillaged and all of that. But I think there's an image that we have of Vikings that you could have maybe gone gloriously OTT with that kind of missed. But what that was swapped for was instead we had this sort of slightly hapless Dad's Army bunch, and I found that sort of winning and quite nice. And I like a story where an unassuming bunch of people dig deep, thanks to the Doctor, and are brave and save the day and outperform what they themselves might think they are capable of. That to me is a very important sort of thing that the Doctor can do, and it's a storytelling device that I think that brings out the best in Doctor Who. The second thing I like, I think I do like the musing on the idea that the Doctor is this person for whom we're all dead. I do find it a compelling aspect of the show. The Doctor's seen the beginning of time, the end of time, and everything in between. So none of us are important, and yet, of course, one of the messages of I'm reluctant to say one of the messages of the show, because I get quite cross with people these days who say you've misunderstood the message of the show. Actually, the show is about exciting adventures with space aliens, and I think sometimes we graft our own message onto it, or we hope that the message of the show is this: the Doctor never takes life. What about the Ogrons? That doesn't count in the Death Day of the Daleks. That doesn't count. So we I think we graft our own views onto the shows. We create our own message out of what the show's message is, and have to be very careful not to judge people who haven't come to the same conclusion that we have, because we all come in with our own experiences and prejudices and lived, views, and to perhaps shape it around those. But I find the idea compelling of this character who, yes, shouldn't give a monkeys about small, insignificant people, in inverted commas, and yet for whom small, beautiful things / people is what life is all about. And I think the fact that the story decides to tackle that, and does it through a young person as well, and shows through the Doctor's actions of arming this village to defend themselves that actually it comes at a cost, is I think a really thoughtful and interesting aspect of the story that is food for thought. And I was going to go for the line about the Big Bang and the sense of futility, because it's a good line. That is a beautiful line. But I think I'm going to go for the boldness of the bit with the baby, just because it teeters. I would be sympathetic to people who say they don't like that bit because it doesn't work, because it's just too much. It's just too mawkish. But I think it's brave to go there. I think if any actor can do it, it's Peter Capaldi. I love the whole idea that the Doctor can speak baby, and that's a very Stephen Moffat-y kind of thing. That just feels, emblematic of this era and the offbeat nature of the humour that pervades it. And that moment when the baby starts crying, when it's juxtaposed with, or when it comes in relation to that traditional scene of going, what have we got to lose? Let's arm ourselves. That a baby goes, and it cuts through all of that. So again, it speaks to that paradoxical nature of yes, fighting in order to win, but also that fighting dies and that everybody grows up to fight, starts as a baby, and it speaks to all, the no matter how we might celebrate a victory through fighting, which is often how Doctor Who wins, is that actually the cost of fighting can be terrible, and how better to emphasize that than by hearing from the most innocent of all, which is a newborn baby who's not got to that point where they consider all the evil things, or gets tainted by, but often, is a victim of the evil that men do. So I think those are my three things. I don't think Joel will have chosen those, but to be perfectly honest, I'm glad I got through the episode with I know a lot of it was going, here's how I've met this person, but tough. You're lucky I talked. Well, maybe you're not lucky I talked. Anyway, let's hand over to Joel, who's thought about this and who likes this story, probably more than I do, and can probably give some interesting conversation points.
So the first thing I've chosen, and I'm sorry, Toby, but I don't think you're going to guess this one. It's the Doctor's theme. And I don't mean the theme tune. I mean the 12th Doctor's theme by Murray Gold. In this episode, it's around the 39-minute mark, I think, as the Doctor decides he's going to save Ashilda and that he's the Doctor and he saves people. And the theme is so bombastic and damn heroic. It's as good as the Matt Smith theme, and I love the Matt Smith theme, but I think I might just like this one a little better because Capaldi is my personal favorite modern Doctor. I love it to bits, and even now it gets me going. I just love Capaldi. It's a great theme, really suits him down to the ground, and I think it's a brilliant moment in the episode as well.
Well, do you know what? I think I probably, when I watched this 4 weeks ago or whatever in preparation for this, thought that I might well choose that theme because I love Peter Capaldi's theme. Did I even choose it? I might have chosen it for Kill the Moon as well. I do think it's a brilliant theme. I think it's ominous, but I also think it's racy. I think it's inspiring. It's really good for moments where the story sort of kicks into gear. It's exciting, but it's also a bit foreboding and scary. I'm a big fan of Murray Gold, and I equally love, as Joel does, Matt Smith's "I Am the Doctor" theme. I love that theme. That's possibly my favourite of all. But I remember when I got, used to hearing Capaldi's Doctor theme and going, that's how we herald meaningful moments for this Doctor, and thinking, yeah, this suits him down to the ground. And I noticed it watching here. I think I commented upon it during the commentary. So, yes, a useful choice. And actually, it's a tribute to the story that I didn't choose it, because I think going into this I might have thought that I would. But of course that's choosing, because for Joel this is his only go at this, whereas I have a lot of episodes of the Capaldi era to do, and many of which feature that theme. So, I would probably discount it unless I was really clutching at straws, because it's in every, it's like choosing the title sequence font or whatever. It's not particular to this story, but for Joel, for whom this is the only story he's doing, it is a particular thing worth picking out. So yeah, I mean, that's good gameplay, Joel, because I was unlikely to choose it, even though it is excellent and definitely worth talking about.
So the second thing I've chosen is what I call the seven samurai of it all. The village being bullied by outsiders, hopeless cause, and the Doctor deciding to stand in the way. It's a classic trope used many, many times. I don't think I've seen Doctor Who do it quite this way, although I might be missing something. But I love how this Doctor is very up and down about it. He's not going to help, but then he thinks it's hopeless and he's ready to give up, and then he will help, and then he won't, and then he discovers eels. It's brilliant. I love the complexity. Unlike other Doctors, he's not an automatic hero. He needs to be coaxed into it, and he's very Hartnell in that way, at least early Hartnell. So I really like that. I really like the complexity of it. So I guess my second thing is that kind of situation of the sort of the town needing protection and one man standing in the way. That's my second thing, the Seven Samurai plot. And Toby, if you've chosen the situation and the plot without exactly referring to Seven Samurai, I think it's okay. I think you deserve it.
Well, I chose Dad's Army, Joel, not Seven Samurai. So I'm not, because I think I was, what appealed to me was the slightly hapless nature of the villagers that the Doctor co-opted into helping, or helping themselves, rather than the one man standing between the invaders and the village. So you've gone for the more, it's almost Seventh Samurai, but also the sort of Western idea, haven't you? That the Doctor places himself between the danger and the village, whereas I was more, I think, about him drilling the bank managers and the shopkeepers and the the road sweepers of Viking times into standing up and defending themselves. So I could maybe get half a point. I hadn't thought of it in quite in terms of Seventh Samurai, Magnificent Seven, of course. Yes, the interloper providing or inspiring the protection, although of course because it is slightly different. The Doctor does do it, but the Doctor also gets them to help themselves in a way that I'm not sure the Seven Samurai / Magnificent Seven do. They do all the fighting, don't they? But they are themselves a motley crew. And actually, I'd have probably liked to see a little bit more of Heidi and Lofty and those guys with a little bit more screen time. I think you could have had slightly more robust characterizations for those guys to really play into that. I think my preference, even though I did highlight it as one of my favorite things, I think I'm so used to those films that were my meat and drink, the Poseidon Adventure, and I talk a lot about this when I talk about Base Under Sieges, of having disparate characters who all have their little story throughout. And the Magnificent Seven, of course, has that where one of them's the knife guy, one of them's got the kids, and and they each have their different sort of character quirk that in some way plays to their storyline. That's their individual story that plays that is part of the mosaic of the big story, which is the baddies are coming to this place and have to be stopped. And it's those individual stories that resonate differently every time. And in fact, I've just done a podcast on The Thing, and that's got the different characters who are established so very quickly and economically. But and every time you watch it, you perhaps might hang your hat on a different character and notice their little quirks and when they're prominent. And then I'd forgotten that bit or whatever. And I don't think you quite get that with this. I don't think that Lofty and Heidi and the other ones are, which speaks volumes me saying that, are quite so well drawn because of a lack of screen time, I think, and that's partially because we have to have that long coda with Ashildr, but also because we did have a couple of sort of scenes, quite long, sort of not expositional scenes, but sort of the scene between the Doctor and Clara, the scene between the Doctor and Ashildr, the scenes between Clara and Ashildr and Odin. There's that's sort of what the story is about. But I think then that perhaps if that had been somehow tightened up to give us a better drawn motley crew, some of whom perhaps could have then died as well. But then again, that would have then taken away from Ashildr's death. So it's so difficult. There's so much to balance when you're telling a modern Doctor Who story, because you have such a short period of time. This story would have been told over 4, maybe 6 episodes in the olden days, where you could have definitely, you'd have needed more of that sort of stuff in order to make the story work. But I do think that's sometimes a victim of in modern Doctor Who is the characters having those moments. Although actually I recently watched Empress of Mars and was impressed by how much story time is given to Godsaker's character journey and backstory and all of those things, and how much time we're given to some of those supporting characters so that we feel their deaths or feel their journeys. So it is possible, and I don't think I think the villagers do slightly lose out in that regard, even though I chose it as one of my things. But anyway, I thought it worth. I don't know. I was prompted by Joel's observation. I think I get half. But what you decide. You decide. Maybe even Joel will decide whether I get a point for choosing that. Joel is will probably hear this. I wonder if he'll hear this before I record episode 2. Well, if he does, I will bring you news as to whether he's decided I get this point or not.
So my third thing in this episode is a person, and it may not be the person you're thinking of. It's Jenna Coleman. My God, she is good. You could throw anything at her, and the show pretty much did. High comedy, high drama, emotional complexity, daring hijinks. Clara Oswald is such a deeply flawed character in many ways, but that's what makes her great. Similar to Capaldi, I guess, when you think about it. Shades of grey are always more interesting than straight black and white, at least to me. And the fact that she was a similar but different version of this character in The Snowmen and, of course, Asylum of the Daleks, Clara but not Clara, it just shows how good she is. I don't think we realized at the time how lucky we were, not just to have Jenna Coleman for all these years as a companion, but with Peter Capaldi, who is one of the best actors the series has ever seen. Maybe the best. I'll leave that up to others to judge. But look, I love Jenna Coleman with Smith, but I think she's such a great foil for Capaldi. And this is the sweet spot here. I think she's fantastic. So Jenna Coleman, she's my third thing.
Yeah, that's the trap for me always in these things. I mean, I think Jenna Coleman is fabulous. I agree. I think, and it's odd, isn't it? Because Matt Smith is a second Doctor, a bit like Sarah Jane with, I was brought up with thinking of Sarah Jane as a Tom Baker companion, and it was quite late in the day. I was probably 7, but relatively late in the day when I discovered that Sarah Jane was actually originally with Pertwee. So I tend to always think of her as a Tom Baker companion, even though she works brilliantly with John Pertwee, and I really enjoy that final season with them. But I think of her more as a Tom Baker companion, even though that wasn't what she was conceived for. And it's a bit like that with Capaldi. I think there's something about the fact that they shouldn't quite gel in a way, and yet they really do. And there's an honesty between them, and perhaps the fact that they don't look as straightforwardly compatible as they might, that I think makes for a quite a mature dynamic and a very well played one. But of course, I'm so unlikely to choose the Doctor or the companion for these, for most, because I tend to take them for granted, and I tend to be looking for new things. But that's not the only person I'm criticising there is me, because sometimes I think I don't see the wood for the trees, and I think sometimes I try to get too clever, and I should be aware that I can sometimes just go, the Doctor actor or the companion actor in this story are bang on the money, and I should give them their due. And I do think Jenna Coleman's excellent. I can't disagree with anything Joel has said there, and she's very good in this episode. And actually, I like the screen time that she gets, and I didn't really talk about it that much during the episode, which again shows that I should sometimes. I always do this, though. I always tend to look past the main characters, and I wonder if that's because I've always felt like a supporting player in life. Who knows?
So normally this is the time that Toby asks his guests to plug something. I don't have anything to plug. Look, I love teaching STEM, and I also teach media to primary school to kids, to up to 12 years old. I love them getting them being critical and creative with media, not just consuming it. But I don't have anything to plug. I guess I would just say I love being a patron of this podcast, and if you were to financially support any podcast and you haven't made that leap yet, let me be the one, aside from Toby, to say you really should. It's absolutely worth it. It's fantastic, and it's a great community as well. My Twitter is @JoelAarons, but I rarely post. I lurk. That's me. Follow me if you want. Don't have to. It's all good. Thank you, Toby, for the opportunity. See you later.
Oh, bless you, Joel. And Joel, the video I will release for patrons, because I used to make these as videos, but I tend to be just doing the audios these days. Maybe in my retirement I'll do it. No, because I haven't recorded the video of this. But Joel has a lovely background of two of the original TARDISes behind him, so I appreciate him going to the effort for that. But it will be seen, if only on Patreon, which he was very kind to plug. I always feel a bit awkward asking people to part with their hard-earned cash for essentially me just talking. But I suppose it is what I do for a living, isn't it? I talk out loud for a living, whether that's a proper job or not. It is what I do. But there we go. So if you like it, yes, there are. Well, I'll do the plugging for the Patreon afterwards. But Joel did a bit there, which was very kind of him. But that's not the last you will hear of him, because we have agreed to do this as a double bill. So the girl has died, but the woman will live. Next week's is the episode I've struggled with more. So I will be it's with some trepidation that I go into it. But also I have a very personal tale to tell, which denizens of Patreonville may well have heard, but some of you more casual listeners may not. And yes, it's some direct experience with the story of the woman who lived. So I'm going to be the man who's going to go to sleep now, but I look forward to joining you next time. Thanks to Joel for being a lovely guest, and thanks to you for listening. And I will speak to you next time. In the meantime, may both your times and your places be very happy indeed. Well, thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Joel Aarons, who, as you heard, you can find on Twitter @Joel Aarons. I am grateful to him and to the patrons who make this podcast possible. and they include Joel Ahrens, Mark Wright, Alan W. Wright, David Workman, Lee Wood, Stephen Vitosky, Mr. Withit, Chris Williams, David James Wilson, Rich Wiggins, Kevin West, Stephen Waters, Peter Ware, Gavin Ware, Craig Wallace, Alistair Wallace, Steve Walker, Jeff Walker, Gary Wales, Lee Wakeley, John Turner, Fanman Sang, Jim Trenowden, Sydney Truitt, David Trainier, Sabrina Tirabassi, Jason Thompson, Richard Thomas, Dr. Gary Thomas, and Matthew Tate. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If, like Joel, you would like to be a patron of these podcasts, you can go to patreon.com/Toby Haydock, where for as little as £3 a month, you get advance releases, bonus releases, your name read out on the credits sometimes, pictures of my dog, and as Joel said, there's a community there. The people leave comments on the releases, sometimes corrections, which means that you then get another release hot on the heels, which is a corrected version of what I said now. Anyway, you can see the working. It's a peek behind the curtain, but it's fun, and there are monthly AMAs which are exclusive. There are, well, they're sort of twice, sometimes 3 monthly now as well, and also peeks behind the scenes at some of the DVD and Blu-ray work that I do, as well as advance releases of everything, and everything is available on the lowest tier. There are little increments as you go up the tiers, but nothing in terms of the releases, the podcast, the content, as it were. That is all there for the lowest tier, which is £3 per month. And you get a 10% discount if you join up for a year, all at the same time. So that's at patreon.com/Toby Haydock. You can give the odd donation if you like, if you'd prefer to do it that way, at Ko-fi, Ko-fi, Ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock. That's a different way of doing it, and it means you're not tied to a monthly commitment. But if you cannot or do not want to do the financial way of supporting, that is totally understandable. Good Lord, times are getting tough. Winter's setting in, the world is going to hell in a handcart, and sometimes what we need is just a bit of friendliness and community, and you are community if you give me your time by listening to this. I am sincerely grateful that there's that the time, it seems to me, passes by so quicker, and certainly as one gets older. And if you are giving some of your time to listening to what I'm putting out there, well, I'm grateful. That flatters me and it touches me, and that's enough. That's plenty. But if you have a little bit of extra time to spare, which costs you nothing financially, but I know time is precious, but if you have a little extra time to spare having listened to these, and you're so inclined, if you could give them 5 stars, thumbs up, like, and subscribe on all the places where you can get these, which is iTunes, which is Apple, which is Podbean, which is Spotify, and now on YouTube as well. That just really helps other people to be introduced to them, and other people to get the gist of what's going on around these parts, and I'd be very grateful. Thanks. I'm also on all the social media, Twitter at Toby Haydock, and also at Haydock Podcasts. I'm on Instagram at Toby.Haydock. I have a YouTube channel. I'd love it if you could like and subscribe to that, because that really helps. I haven't really done it properly once. I did monetize it, and then it sort of fell off, and now it hasn't worked again, and I don't know. I'm probably doing it very badly, but the things get automatically loaded up there now as well. But again, it looks good if you've got people following you and thumbs upping you and liking you and all of that sort of thing. And I've also got a Facebook page where you can follow me as a performer, and I mentioned Instagram. So I'm just out there in all the usual places. I'm not doing TikTok as yet. That may be a social media too far, but you never know, because people do seem to dance a lot on it, and maybe what the world needs is to see me jigging to Cassia's theme or something. But I've got enough to do, which includes my comedy club, Excess Malarkey, which is in Manchester every Tuesday, and you can follow on Twitter at Excess Malarkey, and come and see me sometime, because stand-up comedy is my day job, really, and that's how I got into doing stuff in the world of Doctor Who, because I did a comedy show all about Doctor Who. Okay, well, got through that one. I've been putting that one off for ages and ages, and I don't know why. Because, as I say, I've pretty much enjoyed it. But yeah, I as I say, I'm a bit nervous about the newer episodes, and as I say, this was not one that I was wild about. But that's why it behoves me to do it, I guess. So I hope there was enough in there that was of interest. It's difficult because I don't know the episodes as well to grasp. I can't quote the dialogue. I don't necessarily know exactly the contents of every scene. So I think there's probably less insight, bar me falling back on my old favourites of going, that person's in this and is related to that person, or I met that person once under these circumstances. But there we go. That's what I do, and that's what you got. And, are there many podcasters who've had the writer of the story sleeping on their sofa and watching their VHS of Genesis of the Daleks in, what would that have been? Oh, that would have been probably about 1998, maybe? 25, 27 years. Good God. So if that was 1998, the equivalent back in time from then was before I was born, and was the Pertwee era. So yeah. So it was like me and that person doing something in the Pertwee era. Oh, good Lord. I feel as old as a Viking.